When the woman I was going to marry walked into my office holding a single sheet of paper, she was crying. She said, "Victor, I'm so sorry." Then she handed me the letter that fired me. I read it once. Standard language, immediate separation, accrued leave paid out, laptop and badge surrendered by end of business, signed by Marshall Barrington Cole, founder and chief executive officer. I signed the receipt, one line, blue pencil. I looked at Helena. I said, "I understand, Helena. Don't carry this for him." She stayed for a moment. Then she left. I started packing. It would take him 52 days to understand what he had just done. 6 years of things in that office. The box held 11 pencils, a brass paperweight a client had given me in 2008, a framed photograph of my late wife and our son at the Annapolis Naval Academy Chapel, the gunnery sergeant certificate from 1994, kept because it reminded me I had done harder things than this. The rest I left. I walked past the front desk without stopping. Helena was in Marshall's office. The door was closed. I could hear his voice. I could not hear hers. I kept moving. The Jeep was in the lot. 2011 Grand Cherokee, dark slate gray, 138,000 miles. I set the box on the passenger seat and drove home. Home was Deep Waters, Maryland, 42 minutes from West Pratt Street on a clear afternoon. The bay was frozen at the edges. The sky was the color of wet slate. I did not turn on the radio. At 7:43 that evening, I stood at my kitchen counter boiling water for a French press. Scout, my 10-year-old Springer Spaniel, was asleep on her mat by the back door. The house was quiet in the way houses get when only one person is inside them. I opened my audit diary to a fresh page. I have kept one since June of 1993, when I was still a Marine. 43 volumes, second shelf of the home office, in order. Pencil only, one line per entry, dated. I wrote the date. I wrote that Marshall had terminated me. I wrote that Helena had delivered the letter. I closed the book. Then I sat with Scout on the porch until the water turned cold. My name is Victor Ashbrook. I am 54 years old. I was born in Cumberland, Maryland, in the spring of 1968. I joined the Marine Corps on my 18th birthday because I did not want to owe anyone money for college. 8 years, Camp Lejeune, Iwakuni, Pendleton, finance. I counted other people's money in ledgers that did not yet live on computers. I was good at it. I made gunnery sergeant in 1994, the week before discharge. I used the GI Bill at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. 3 years of accounting, accelerated. I passed the CPA exam in Maryland in 1998. License number 29847. I still have it. I married Teresa Garrett on the 1st of August, 1997. At the Annapolis Naval Academy Chapel. She was a high school counselor. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2005. 6 years later, on the 14th of December, 2011, she died at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Cardiopulmonary failure secondary to advanced MS. She was 41. Our son Jonah was born in 2000. He was diagnosed with autism in 2002. He is verbal but limited. He lives in a group home in Patterson Park now, and I visit him every Sunday afternoon between 1 and 3. Permanent 1:30 recurring entry in a paper calendar. I have not missed one. Not for illness, not for weather, not for work. After Teresa, I kept working. Big Four audit at Deloitte, Baltimore from 1997 through 2004. A master's in nonprofit management at Johns Hopkins, evening part-time, which I finished 8 months late because I missed a semester the year Teresa got sicker. I paid the late fees out of pocket. I took the thesis defense alone, in a room with 2 examiners I had never met. Certified fraud examiner in 2000. Director of finance at the Greater Baltimore Community Foundation from 2004 to 2015. 11 years. Between 2015 and 2017, I sat on the board of the Annapolis Maritime Museum as treasurer, 3 hours a week to keep my hands in ledger work without commuting downtown. It was a quiet stretch. I needed one. In September of 2015, I did one other thing. I drove to a diner in 7 Maryland, and met 2 old Marines over coffee. Roberto Delgado, finance staff sergeant on discharge, CPA in Annapolis since 1999. Miriam Hobson, finance gunnery sergeant, forensic examiner, the smartest person I served with. We had a paper napkin and a pen between us. Beto said, "Protect your name." Then he said, "If you ever have to leave a job fast, you want a door already open." We filed articles of organization the next week. Ashbrook Hobson Delgado, Maryland Maryland entity, registered agent in Annapolis. We did no work through it for 7 years. It sat on a shelf. It existed. That was the point. In June of 2016, the year Jonah turned 16, I funded a special needs trust in his name, $340,000. Beto Delgado as trustee. The trust covers every supplemental cost his Medicaid waiver does not, specialist visits, dental, sensory integration therapy, the $1,840 a month that sits between what Maryland provides and what Jonah actually needs. At the current draw rate, the trust covers Jonah through age 65. I have not had to choose between my son's care and any employer's leverage since the summer of 2016. That matters for reasons I will get to. In June of 2017, Eleanor Prescott called me. Eleanor is 71. She was a federal prosecutor in the District of Maryland from 1976 through 2011. Retired, not quiet. She had been recruited to the board of a new Baltimore foundation, and she did not trust the man they had hired to run the finance side. She trusted my reference from Greater Baltimore. She asked me to take the controller seat. The foundation was Barrington Legacy. $12 million of seed money from the Barrington real estate family's 2014 commercial portfolio sale, a gleaming 4th floor on West Pratt Street. A founder named Marshall Barrington Cole married into the family, English literature major from Washington and Lee, 2-year art history masters from Sotheby's in London, 44 years old, no non-profit operating experience, no credentialed finance training, no compliance background. 5 of 7 board members hand-picked from his Roland Park social circle. I took the job because Eleanor asked me to, and because the books looked clean. I promised her I would keep them that way. If you've ever been told you're not ready by someone who couldn't do your job for 5 minutes, you know exactly where this is going. Like and subscribe. Now comes the part Marshall will wish I had noticed before he signed. In 2018, the foundation was in the middle of applying for 3 major restricted grants. MacArthur Foundation, $4.5 million. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $4.2 million. The USAID pass-through through the Council on Foundations, $2.5 million. $11.2 million total, dispersed over 5 years, tied to specific humanitarian programs the foundation had committed to run. When restricted grants of that size are negotiated, the funder sends a draft agreement. Most small foundations sign what they are handed. I did not. I wrote a rider, 1 paragraph, 3 different documents, slight phrasing tweaks per funder. The MacArthur version, almost word for word, ran like this. In the event the named principal financial officer departs the grantee organization without a 60-day prior written successor notification satisfactory to the grantor, grantor reserves the right to 1. Demand a full forensic audit of all restricted fund deployments to date, and 2. Recall any unspent restricted balance within 60 days of demand. The named principal financial officer for the term of this agreement is Victor M. Ashbrook, Maryland CPA license number 29847. I emailed the rider to Marshall with a cover note. I told him it was standard counsel on foundations language, which in the broad sense it was. I told him the program officers had asked for it, which was true. I told him it would speed execution, which also was true. Marshall signed all 3 agreements without legal review. He did not reread them. I saved the executed files to 2 drives. I filed the originals in a leather portfolio in my desk. I never mentioned the rider again. There were 2 other pieces of paper that named me personally. The IRS 990 the foundation filed every year listed me as the principal financial signatory on the officer signature line. That is the line where a human being affirms, under penalty of perjury, the accuracy of the return. Removal of that human without a qualified successor inside 30 days triggers an enforcement letter from the exempt organizations unit. The clock is statutory. Nobody gets to argue with it. The Maryland Attorney General's charitable organization registration listed me as the CPA of record. Maryland treats that line the way the IRS treats the 990 officer line. Removal without successor inside 30 days triggers an inquiry. 60 days after that, a public listing on the state's charities watch page. 5 pieces of paper, 3 private donors, 1 federal agency, 1 state regulator, all of them naming a specific human being, me, with my license number, on file in archives I could not remove, and Marshall had never thought to read. I met Helena at a board reception in September of 2019. She was Marshall's executive assistant, dry, loyal, kind. I asked her to marry me on Christmas Eve, 2020, on the porch where I'm sitting now, with Scout asleep under the chair. We were set to marry on the 3rd of October, 2023. Marshall knew all of that. He had her deliver the letter because he thought that was the cleanest way to make sure I did not make a scene. He did not know about the rider. He did not know about the Maryland filing. He did not know about the dormant company in Annapolis that had been sitting on a shelf for 7 years. He did not know about the trust that meant I did not need him. He did not know I had been a Marine. He was about to. I sat on the porch through Wednesday, Thursday, and most of Friday. Scout sat with me. The weather did not move. The bay did not unfreeze. I did not call Marshall. I did not call the board. I did not call my lawyer. I called Beto Delgado on Wednesday morning and told him what had happened. He said, "When are you ready to start?" I said, "Saturday." He said, "Done." I called Miriam on Wednesday afternoon. She said, "Send me the file numbers." I sent them. That was all the noise I made for 72 hours. Eleanor Prescott called me Friday at 11:18 in the morning. She had been on a separate board call when somebody mentioned in passing that Barrington Legacy had a new organizational chart. Eleanor pulled the chart up on her phone in real time and saw that the financial controller line read vacant. She excused herself, drove from her apartment in Mount Vernon to a parking lot off Charles Street, and dialed me from the front seat. "Victor, what happened?" I told her. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He did not bring this to the board." "No." "Did he document a reason?" "No cause stated." She was quiet again. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" I said, "Nothing yet. I will write Saturday." She said, "I will be ready." Helena came home Friday evening. She had been at her sister's in Easton for 3 nights. She did not come into the house all the way at first. She stood inside the door and said my name, and then she sat on the bench by the coat hooks and cried. I sat next to her. I did not say anything for a while. Then I said, "Tell me what he said to you." Marshall had asked her into his office Tuesday morning. He had told her he was making a difficult leadership decision. He had told her she was the only person at the foundation who could deliver it without creating drama. He had told her any other arrangement would compromise her position. He had handed her the letter at 3:48 in the afternoon and said, "Wait until I am out of the building, then deliver it. Lock the door behind you." She had stayed at her desk. She had watched him take the executive elevator at 4:06. She had sat there for 8 minutes. Then she had walked into my office. "I am sorry," she said again. I said, "I told you, don't carry this for him." She said, "I cannot stop carrying it." I said, "Then carry it for me. We will use it." Saturday I drafted a short email at the kitchen counter, 1 paragraph. The cursor sat there for 30 minutes while I weighed it word by word. I sent it at 11:53 at night after Helena was asleep so that nobody would read it before Sunday morning. The recipients were the 7 members of the Barrington Legacy Foundation Board, the Maryland Attorney General's Charities Bureau intake address, and the IRS Exempt Organizations Enforcement mailbox. The subject line read, "Notification, 990 signatory withdrawal, donor rider activation, Maryland successor requirement." The body had 3 sentences. The first stated the date and time of my termination and the absence of any successor signatory. The second listed the 3 donor agreements by funder, dollar amount, and date of execution, and noted the personal signatory rider language attached as files. The third stated that my CPA of record line on the Maryland charitable registration had been vacated effective the same date. There was no demand. There was no threat. There was no appeal. The facts, the documents, and the signatures. I closed my laptop. I went to bed. Marshall did not read the Saturday email until late Tuesday. On Tuesday morning, January 13th, at 7:42, he posted to LinkedIn. The photo was Cameron Hobart, his 32-year-old first cousin, standing at the Barrington Legacy entrance in stone-colored chinos and a cashmere quarter-zip. The caption read, "Thrilled to announce Cameron Hobart joining Barrington Legacy as our new Chief Human Resources Officer. Fresh perspective, values-aligned leadership." The post sat on LinkedIn for 12 days before he took it down. By the time he took it down, it had 341 comments. None of them were from anyone on the Barrington board. Marshall saw my Saturday email late Tuesday evening after the LinkedIn post was up. He did not respond. What none of us knew until exactly 7 days later was that Cameron had recorded his Sunday phone call with Marshall. Cameron had not yet officially started in his CHRO role. His start date was set for February 2nd, but he had been on transition calls with Marshall every Sunday since the offer was accepted in early December. He used his personal iPhone for those calls because it was new and he did not trust the foundation laptop the IT desk had assigned him. He recorded every management call he had taken since his first HR-adjacent job in 2020. Self-preservation. He told no one. Cameron's iPhone was synced to an iCloud account that the foundation's IT administrator, Dale Merritt, had legacy admin access to. Dale had set the account up himself 3 years earlier for the prior CHRO, who had used the same backup arrangement. Nobody had revoked Dale's access. Cameron did not know it existed. Dale forwarded the audio file to me Monday, January 19th at 11:18 in the morning. No envelope text, just the attachment. The clip was 4 minutes long. Cameron had asked Marshall, in the careful voice of a man trying to do his job without losing it, whether the foundation had any outstanding legal commitments naming the previous controller personally. Marshall had said, "He is a line item, not a leader. We do not assign legal commitments to line items." Cameron had said, "Marshall, the donor agreements. I pulled the executed files out of the shared drive last night. He is named in all three. There is rider language." Marshall had said, "Riders are boilerplate." Cameron had said, "Marshall, I don't think you understand what he's holding. I warned you when you mentioned the timing. If the donors see those riders activate, we are done." And then Marshall had said the line that ended his career. "He won't fight. He's got a son who can't fend for himself. He'll process this quietly and move on. That's who he is." I listened to the clip twice. Then I sent it to Eleanor, then to Beto, then to Miriam. Then I closed my laptop and walked scout on the breakwater. The audio did not change my plan. It only confirmed what the plan already assumed. Helena saw the LinkedIn post on Friday, January 23rd. She read it 3 times. She drove home at lunchtime and did not go back. On Monday, February 2nd, she walked into Marshall's office without an appointment, handed him a 1-page resignation letter she had typed at our kitchen table the night before, and left without saying a word. Marshall offered her a $40,000 retention bonus before she got to the door. She said, "I have no interest in being retained." He sent the offer in writing 2 hours later, copying Cameron. She replied within the hour, 1 word, "Decline." Cameron never wrote back. The IRS certified letter arrived at the Barrington offices on Tuesday, February 10th. It informed the foundation that the Form 990 filed for tax year 2021 had its officer signature line vacated effective January 8th, that no successor signatory had been registered within the statutory 30-day window, and that the exempt organizations unit was opening an enforcement file. The Maryland Attorney General's Charitable Bureau opened its inquiry the next morning, citing the vacated CPA of record line. The inquiry letter named the foundation, listed the 3 open restricted grants, and requested response within 30 days. Lillian Ward, the MacArthur program officer, emailed me on Thursday the 12th. Her note said only, "We are aware. Please advise on successor arrangements." I did not advise. I did not respond. The riders were not addressed to me anymore. They were addressed to Marshall. On Friday the 13th, MacArthur sent the formal 60-day demand for forensic audit and recall of unspent restricted balance, $3.8 million. On Monday the 16th, Gates followed with $3.1 million. On Wednesday, the 18th, the USAID pass-through followed with $1.9 million, $8.8 million in active demand against a foundation whose unrestricted operating reserves stood at $12.4 million. Marshall called Cameron on Sunday, February 8th, 2 days before the IRS letter arrived. Cameron recorded that call too. The clip ran 90 seconds. Marshall said, "Pull up the donor agreements. I want to see the rider language." Cameron said, "I sent it to you on January 12th. Marshall said, "Send it again." There was a long pause. Cameron's keyboard. Then Marshall's voice. Lower, slower. "He still has the riders. Why does he still have the riders?" Cameron did not answer. The recording ended. That night, Cameron began copying every recording on his iPhone voice memos onto a single USB drive. Eleanor and Warren Okafor invoked Maryland's emergency board meeting statute on Wednesday, February 18th. 2 independent board members signed request, expedited notice under the statute's emergency provision. The meeting was set for Friday, February 27th, 1 in the afternoon, in the foundation's main boardroom on the 4th floor of 612 West Pratt Street. 6 board members attended in person. Cameron attended in his official capacity as Chief Human Resources Officer. I attended remotely by video conference on Eleanor's request because the public listing on the Maryland Charities Watch page had gone live the day before, and her instinct was to keep me visible without putting me in the room. Warren Okafor presented first. He laid the IRS notice, the Maryland Attorney General inquiry, and the 3 donor demand letters on the conference table side by side from a black leather portfolio. He spoke for 9 minutes. He did not raise his voice. Eleanor read the Maryland Non-Profit Fiduciary Duty Statute aloud, the section that personally exposes a CEO who fails to inform the board of decisions creating regulatory exposure exceeding $250,000. She read it slowly. She read it once. She did not look up. Cameron asked to speak before the vote. He set a USB drive on the conference table in front of Eleanor and said, "There are 11 recordings on this. Marshall is on every one of them. The rider warning is recording number 4. He did not look at Marshall. Marshall did not look at anyone. The board voted 6-1 to place Marshall on indefinite administrative leave pending forensic audit. Marshall was the sole no. The board voted 7-0 to terminate Cameron Hobart's Chief Human Resources Officer role, effective immediately, in light of his concurrent disclosure of recordings without prior board notification. Eleanor walked Marshall to the elevator. She did not speak. She returned to the conference room alone. The vote tally was filed with the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation that afternoon at 3:12. I closed the video call. Eleanor was on the porch. Scout was at her feet. We did not say anything for a while. Then I picked up my phone and called Beto. He answered on the second ring. He said, "Open the door." I drove to 1701 Utah Place on Monday, March 2nd. The building was a converted brick row house 2 blocks south of Mount Royal Avenue, 3,000 square feet over 2 floors, last occupied by a defunct architecture firm. The landlord had given Beto the keys the previous Friday. The sign on the front door read Ashbrook Hobson Delgado in plain serif letters on brushed brass. We had ordered the sign in 2015 and stored it in a cardboard box at the back of Beto's garage. 8 years. It still fit. Miriam was already inside when I arrived. She had set up 2 desks, a small conference table, and a printer in the front room. The back room held a fireproof filing cabinet and a coffee maker that nobody had used yet. Beto came in at 7:45, carrying a paper bag of bagels and a thermos of black coffee. He set them on the conference table without ceremony. Eleanor Prescott arrived at 8:50 in the morning. She had agreed the night before to chair an independent advisory board for the firm, on the condition that no compensation flowed and her only role was to read the books we showed her. She brought a small white box from a bakery in Roland Park and a folder containing a 1-page advisory board engagement letter she had drafted herself. The first call came in at 9:23. It was the deputy director of the program team at the MacArthur Foundation. She had been authorized at 6 in the morning to ask whether Ashbrook Hobson Delgado would consider serving as interim fiscal sponsor for the recall and redirect of MacArthur's $3.8 million restricted balance. Beto answered. He said, "We can have a memorandum on your desk by Friday." She said, "Thank you." The second call came at 10:14. Gates Foundation, same conversation, $3.1 million. The third came at 11:06. The USAID pass-through, $1.9 million. By Wednesday, 3 additional mid-tier donors had reached out, 2 Baltimore family foundations and a regional health endowment. By Friday, the cumulative reroute commitment stood at $14.8 million. By the end of April, it was $17.4 million. None of the donors asked for a discount. They asked for terms. By mid-March, we had hired 2 associates and a part-time bookkeeper, all of them women I had worked with at Greater Baltimore between 2004 and 2015. None of them needed to be sold on the firm. They needed to be assigned a desk and a parking space. We assigned the desks first. The second floor opened in April. We added a fireproof file room, a small library that Eleanor curated personally with 17 volumes of Maryland non-profit case law and a coffee maker that finally got used. Miriam Hobson's forensic audit ran from the second week of March through the middle of June. She charged the receivership estate her firm's standard hourly rate, neither a discount nor a premium. She did not socialize with the engagement. Her final report ran 193 pages. The headline finding was $312,000 in commingled personal expenses charged to foundation accounts over a 5-year window. The Range Rover lease at $1,485 a month, run through an executive mobility line item Marshall had personally approved. 2 yacht club memberships at the Annapolis Yacht Club and the Gibson Island Club, each routed through stakeholder cultivation. 3 personal credit card statements where business and personal charges had been bundled and reimbursed without documentation. A short list of restaurant invoices that the receiver redacted because Marshall's wife Whitney Barrington was named on them. A piece of art purchased at a Sotheby's London auction in 2019 for $96,000 and delivered to Marshall's home address, expense to the foundation under the line item Executive Office Furnishings. Miriam handed the report to the receiver on Monday, June 15th. She did not give an interview. She did not testify until subpoenaed in September. The Maryland Attorney General placed the Barrington Legacy Foundation in receivership on Monday, July 6th. Marshall Barrington Cole was permanently barred from board service for any Maryland nonprofit, including private operating foundations and donor-advised funds. The bar was filed under the Maryland Charitable Solicitations Act and indexed by the Secretary of State's office. The Annapolis Yacht Club revoked Marshall's membership on July 12th, citing the commingled expense findings and a member conduct clause Marshall had read no more carefully than the donor riders. The Gibson Island Club followed the same week. The Roland Park social calendar quietly closed itself around him by the kind of negotiation that does not require a vote. Cameron Hobart's professional listings on the major HR recruiting platforms went private the week after his February termination and stayed private through the rest of the year. He never wrote me. I never heard his voice again. The Barrington real estate family did not comment publicly. I didn't follow what came next inside their household. It was not the work I was paid to do. The foundation formally dissolved on Saturday, October 3rd, 2023. The receiver filed the paperwork at 3:40 in the afternoon. Remaining unrestricted assets, $4.2 million, after audit and creditor satisfaction, were transferred to an unrelated Baltimore community foundation that had agreed in writing to direct them toward homeless youth education programs in the city, which had been one of Barrington Legacy's stated priority areas before any of this began. Eleanor had picked the recipient herself. She did not ask me to vote. Helena and I were married on the Bayside porch in Deep Waters at 5:30 the same evening. Eleanor Prescott officiated. Beto Delgado was the best man. Helena's mother, May Ward, 76, walked her down a path of crushed oyster shell from the side gate to the chair where Eleanor stood. 40 guests, string lights between the house and the bay. A folk trio Helena had hired on a friend's recommendation played quietly from the porch corner. The bay was the color of tarnished silver. The wind off the water was steady but soft. On a small side table beside the porch railing sat two framed photographs. One was Teresa Garrett at 33, on the Severn River the summer before she got sick, smiling at a camera I no longer remember holding. The other was May Ward at 24, in 1971, in her own wedding dress beside a man who had died of an aneurysm in 2014. We exchanged short vows. Helena's were specific. Mine was specific too. When Eleanor pronounced us married, Scout came up the porch steps and sat down between us. Beto gave the only toast. He said 3 sentences, holding a paper napkin he had folded that afternoon at the diner in Severn, where the napkin from 2015 had once been folded. He said, "I told this man 8 years ago to protect his name. He did better. He stayed who he already was." He raised his glass. He sat down. Later, after most of the guests had left, Helena and I stood on the porch with the bay behind us and danced once to a song her father used to play on a Sunday morning radio program in Easton. The folk trio knew it. May had asked. Jonah's 23rd birthday was on Sunday, November 8th, at the group home in Patterson Park. Sheet cake from the same bakery his case manager had used since his 18th. Paper streamers in green because green is his favorite color. A stuffed Linux penguin from the Sheltered Workshop Christmas exchange. Regifted because Jonah liked the texture of the felt feet. I brought him an audit diary of his own. 43 volumes of mine sat on his father's home office shelf in Deep Waters. Volume 1 of his I left on the side table by his bed, with one entry already in it, written in his case manager's hand, because Jonah's penmanship was not yet up to the task. "Today is my birthday. My dad came. We had cake. Helena came with me. Jonah had met her 7 times before the wedding, and he had agreed at the last meeting that she could bring an extra slice of cake. I hugged him for 41 seconds. He did not move away. His case manager wrote the duration on the daily log, because 41 was a record. The previous record had been 18. The group home staff sang. Jonah looked at the penguin. He smiled. "I have written everything above on a single page in the audit diary I keep at the kitchen counter, in pencil, 1 line per event, dated. ended. I have one more entry to make. Eleanor Prescott's letter arrived by mail on Thursday, November 19th at 7:43 in the morning. A single sheet of cream stock, hand-folded, no return address other than her name above her former federal prosecutor's office address, an address she had kept on her stationery the way some retired professionals do. The letter ran 2 paragraphs. The first thanked me for trusting her with the foundation board seat in 2017. The second was longer. She wrote that she had reviewed her career on the long flight back from a granddaughter's wedding in Edinburgh the prior week. She wrote that across 35 years of federal prosecution she had filed many indictments and won most of them, and that what had stayed with her was not the convictions but the people who had refused to let injustice acquire the texture of normal. She wrote that I had stayed on her short list. She wrote that she was glad she had answered her phone in 2017 when my reference came through. She signed it, "With unsentimental respect, Eleanor." I pinned the letter above the kitchen photograph wall, between Teresa at 33 on the Severn River and May at 24 in 1971. Scout watched from the doorway. Helena was not yet awake. The thing about a fiduciary signature is, the second you stop putting it on the page goes blank in places no one else can see. He didn't have the courage to fire me himself, so he ordered the woman I loved to do it. He forgot whose name was on every federal filing. He forgot whose signature the donors trusted. He forgot there is nothing quieter or heavier than a CPA who stops signing his own name. If you stayed with this story all the way to the end, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done with 8 years of leverage and a quiet door already open. And if you have not yet subscribed, subscribe and ring the notification bell so the next story finds you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.